The Cache tab is going to allow you to create a cache of your hair simulation. What a cache is going to do is store all of the animation of the hairs into the file itself. So once you play it back, it's not going to be trying to calculate any of the dynamics. It's just going to use that stored animation. So if we hit play, you'll see that it takes some time to actually calculate from frame to frame. And with this sort of viewport performance, it is fairly hard to get a good idea of the type of motion that I'm getting. So let's pause this and then go back to the beginning. To create a cache, all we're going to do is click Calculate. Once we do that, it's going to go through the entire animation once. And as it's doing this, it is saving each frame and the animation for that frame. So you'll see here that we can actually see a memory indicator, and it's telling us how much memory is being used to store the animation. And as a new frame gets added, you'll see that the memory is going to increase. Once the cache has been created, you'll see that the Dynamics Cache checkbox is enabled. And that means that the next time we hit play, it's going to use the cached animation rather than recalculate the dynamics. Let's just pause this, go back to the beginning, and uncheck Dynamics Cache. If we hit play again, we can see that Cinema is going back to using the dynamic simulation, so it's taking a lot more time. Checking Dynamics Cache on again, you'll see that it'll switch instantly to that cached animation we created. Once we have created a cache, you'll see that a lot of the options here also become available to work with. The first checkbox is Compress, and it's going to add compression to the cached solution. Really all this does is affect the way that memory is managed. So with Compress checked, we have a memory usage of about 780K. Unchecked, it goes up to 1.4 or 1.5 megabytes. And if you're saving your file, this amount of memory is going to be included in that saved file. So if you're really worried about the amount of space it's going to take up, feel free to check the compress checkbox. We then have a button for empty cache, and this one is pretty straightforward. If you click this button, it's going to erase the cache that you have created. So in this case, we can click on empty. You'll see that the memory goes down to 0 bytes, and we no longer have any options here available to us. If we hit play in the viewport, you'll also see that we're back to using the dynamics that are being calculated in real time. Let's hit pause and go back to the start. So we can undo, and you'll see that even undoing is not going to bring the cache back. So if you are going to be emptying your cache, make sure that you really want to get rid of that saved solution. We then have a button here for Update Frame and a checkbox for Editable. And between the two of these, you're going to be able to actually go in and edit the cache that you've created. So if we scrub through the timeline, we can find a hair that's behaving badly. And on frame 23, we have this wonderful guide right here that has kind of gone all over the place. If we go one frame earlier, you'll see that it looks normal. And one frame later, it looks normal again. So it's really just the one frame where it's causing problems. And rather than go through and try to recalculate the cache a whole bunch of times with different settings, we can go in and edit this one frame. Now, if we go to the Simulation menu and choose Hair Tools and the Brush tool, you'll see that the hairs themselves snap back to their original position. If we look at the hair object, our cache still exists. But as soon as we try to brush any of the hairs, it is going to void the cache. So the cache is just dropped and we lose any of the simulation that we had. Also, if you try to undo, you're not going to get that cache back. Now, in my case, I can simply go back to revert to saved, and I'm safe. But if you want to edit this particular frame, you have to make sure that you choose the editable checkbox here. Now if I go to simulation, select the hair tools, and then the brush again, you'll see that the hairs remain in their current position. And I can now adjust this hair so that it looks however I want it to look. In this case, I can also go to the simulation and change the hair mode to something like points. And now I can affect all of the vertices along this hair. Maybe if I set the brush to something like smooth, we can adjust this hair so that it is a little bit less crazy. You can also adjust the scale on the hair. Maybe in this case a negative scale will be helpful. And once I've made the changes to the hair that I wanted to make, I can go back to the hair object and click on Update Frame. Now if we go back one frame, you'll see that we have our initial cache that was there. We can go forward a frame, and we have the edited hair. And forward at another frame, we have the hair in its new position again. Once we've finished making any edits, we can simply uncheck the editable option here. And as long as we're in the Move tool and not in the Brush tool, our cache is going to be maintained. You next have some load and save buttons, and these are going to allow you to take the cache that you've created and save it, or load it for later, or load it for use later on. And this is great if you are moving between several different simulations and you want to reference back to ones just to see the differences, or even if you want to keep the Cinema 4D file smaller, you can save your cache by clicking on the Save button, which is going to open up your Save File dialog here. And you simply name your file. Let's just call this the hair cache, and click on Save. At this point, the cache has been saved. So we could possibly empty the cache so that our hairs are no longer going to be controlled by that animation. They're just going to be controlled by the basic dynamic sim in Cinema 4D. So you'll see it's nice and slow again. Now, if we go to the Load button and select the hair cache that we created, you'll see that that loads the dynamics cache into our file again. And if we go back to the start and hit play, we get that nice, quick feedback that we were expecting from the cached solution.